Well, it's good to be with you guys today. It is a couple minutes after the hour, so if you don't mind, I can just jump into it. I always like to kind of be a little bit on time, make sure we know what's going on. Joel is actually traveling today, so he's between locations. I see that he has a small icon in the corner, so we might hear Joel's voice pop in every once in a while when we have this conversation.
I am here.
Hey, Joel, see there it
I'm
is.
just I'm listening in. So
Like
as you were.
the voice of God feature. So when we're off track, maybe Joel will just jump in here and keep us back on track or whatever. Um, I first of all thank you guys for joining us. You know, the conversation, Matt, I think really got started with something you and Joel were talking about, an article that you had read recently about people, and you could talk to us about that, just like what that's going to be. I'm going to get Vikkal in here too. He just jumped in, so. And then Ashley, you and I continued that conversation a little bit this morning of what it really means to get, I'll say back to the office, because we've all been at work. So back to work isn't necessarily the right way of saying it. But I think beyond just like the political part or moral part or these other big questions that we're asking too, I think there's some hangover of just what it meant to be a remote worker, what it means to be an office worker, and to balance that as a business owner. So that's the conversation we want to have today. It's kind of interesting moment for it. I feel like we've been processing it probably as business owners for a few months now, and we have months left to figure out the right way of doing it. But to kind of jump in and get our temperature now of what people are thinking and processing, it's going to be a great conversation because I know we're all going to be kind of part of something here, and we're going to set some new trends along the way. Before we jump into that, though, just beyond the filler, welcome to all of you that are listening. Appreciate you being part of the community, listening into the conversation we're having. This weekly briefing really is a weekly check-in, just talk about what's happening in our industry, trends that we see, moments that are coming up. And we do this every week to just get some new voices out there. Our hope is that this inspires some thoughts in you. And then if you want to continue the conversation, we do have a Rev community that you're all invited to and welcome to be part of. And just, become members of that, keep the conversation going. Today, we're talking to Vikkal, Ashley, and Matt about this topic because we personally know that they've been processing it and having some conversations with them. But Matt, how about we have you kind of kick us off to what it is that started the process going for you and what that moment of tension was that you kind of saw coming up, and maybe we can start the conversation from that point.
Sure. I think the moment of tension is just being at home still. That's kind of, the obvious thing. But this was back in May. I saw an article that was written by the CEO of Washingtonian Magazine. And being here in DC, the Washingtonian Magazine is kind of a big deal, a who's who kind of thing. And she wrote this opinion piece in the Post that was talking about like getting back to work and what CEOs think of it. But it was less about what she wrote that was newsworthy, and more about how her staff reacted. Her staff went on a one-day protest, I guess it was, and refused to publish because they didn't like what she said. They felt their jobs were threatened by what she said. I'll send the links out after this and you guys can all read it for yourself inside. But I was actually 100% on her side. I was like, I don't think she said anything really that bad. I think she said exactly what we've all thought as owners, and like, okay, now what? And so this came up in my call with Joel yesterday, and it was like, oh my gosh, you have to read this article. This happened months ago, blah, blah, blah. And they just kind of like got me going. And he was like, you need to talk with us tomorrow. I was like, okay, I just in my opinion, but okay.
So in that case, the thought is even the risk of saying you want to go back to work is kind of maybe putting you at odds with your employees. And actually, the conversation we had this morning was you've done something similar where you had like an all team meeting and started discussing what it was to come back to work. What was your team's reaction to that conversation?
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it came up for us today too. You mentioned you were having this meeting and I let you know what was going on with us. And we've been a larger studio over the last year. We do series work, so we got up to about 50 people, and we're kind of in a hiatus break right now, and so our numbers are a little bit lower, but still, we saw this sort of like, as all of us as owners, you kind of see this out in front of you. It's like at some point we're going to have to cross this bridge and have this discussion. And we have an HR person that we hired about a year ago as we were ramping into these larger numbers. And so I've had this discussion with her, and it's sort of like, this is not going to be an easy discussion, but it's one that's going to have to happen. And our decision was basically to make a plan and then have an all staff and present that plan. But like you, Matt, it was sort of like, I dreaded having the discussion, but we took a little survey of everyone, first of all, to find out who was vaccinated and who wasn't, and take the temperature of people and what they wanted to how they were feeling about it. And basically what we found out was that there's these two issues, and weirdly they're tied together now, which they're unrelated, but they're tied together, which are this fear of COVID and this COVID waning, and the numbers here where we are in Georgia are down almost in the basement. I mean, there's just really not a lot of cases. And by the end of June, we don't expect COVID to really be a factor here anymore. And then there's this, we want to work from home issue. And they've become intertwined. And what we've realized is that for us, at least, what the decision we've made is to make them not together anymore. People are sort of enthusiastic about what your policy is about working from home, and it's tied together with this COVID issue. So our plan and what we did in our all staff on Friday was like, here's when we're returning to work. Due to the COVID, we left the office. We left the office over a year ago. We went through all the stats, why we left the office, what the numbers were, what the COVID numbers were, what the reasons we left our office, what the COVID numbers in our area are now, and the number of vaccinations and what the what the CDC says. We went through all of that, and we presented all that information to everyone. And then we said, here's when we're coming back to work. We're giving you lots of runway, a month of runway to get prepared. And here's why we're coming back to work. A number of tech tickets have gone up to 200 tech tickets in the last so many months because of remote support and all these things. So we just presented all the facts, and the number of responses we got back were basically like, but I like working from home. Can I work from home part of the time? When can I work from home? What's the work from home policy? So what we decided to put forth to everyone was like, we're separating the two. It's not that we're not going to consider a work from home policy. We might, but that's something we have to work through separate to COVID. COVID return from work is separate to work from home benefit. That's a benefit that we have to consider, just like your healthcare, just like your 401k. That's separate to return from work from COVID. And so that's how we're addressing it with all the employees now. It's like, we're returning to work from the COVID when we left from work. And then we'll talk about a benefit that's just like all these other benefits.
So the work from home benefit really becomes like a work from home culture that some studios can enact. Others people have to be more resistant to it for tech reasons or security reasons, what have you. But this thought that work from home becomes a culture almost is what this moment has created, right? It's maybe the thought was someday it'd be really cool to work from home. The pandemic shutdown allowed us all to go work from home. Our clients aren't going to hold us accountable anymore if we want to do that as a priority. Vikkal, I think your studio, you're processing something similar, right? Of like, what do you want your culture to be, and how that can or can't change if people work from home or are coming into the office?
Yeah, exactly. I think, we are in the same crisis that everybody else is in. All business owners that are sort of in my circle of trust, we've been talking to them, and it's really been like, what are you doing? And, they want to sort of set industry standards. And I think that's really what a lot of artists are also looking to. Like they're sort of comparing where they're at with where their friends are at, or where their, past colleagues are. And I really think, like, I like your idea, Ashley, of decoupling the two. I really think, like, let's just get back to life first, and like we left a year ago, and then, posing this as a benefit, I think can work. Because, in our studio, we have like a variety of people, right? Like we have people that are married, there are people with kids, single, young people. And I think for all of them, there are like different factors that they sort of deal with. I have 3 kids, and so working from home is really not a possibility for me. Like even the height of COVID, like I would definitely run to the office in my car, park downstairs, and then close the doors and work. So for me, I think that's sort of a better place and a mindset. But as a company, what it means to us to all come together and work. And it's not about like having a drink at the end of work, or even like sort of celebrating birthdays. The access to like turn your chair around and what do you think of this, just processes that just gets done faster. And now everything is twice as delayed. Like there's meetings and meetings and meetings and Slack messages. And I think there are a lot of I feel like over the year and a half there has been a lot of frustration in projects that could have been like super smooth.
Yeah.
We've done like way more complicated projects without any frustrations in person. And like this sort of remote work, managing a team of 15 people, working on the one project, they're bound to more than 50% of the people were like super frustrated because, like the other are not pulling their weight, or, someone has to log off at 6 and works at 10. And this person they're working with is like, dude, I've been working till 7. I don't need to get back on my computer at 10. So
Yeah.
I think that sort of mismatch seems to be a problem. So level setting everything to like 10 to 7 or 10 to 6 are our work hours. And, we work within the confines of those hours. And, work from home should be treated as a benefit and, could be taken up case by case. Again, also the infrastructure, like how do you, for a year and a half, like there are tons of band-aids that we put through. And as business owners, just we know like how much money we are bleeding with these remote desktops, like $600 a month, remote desktops, and the tech staff to, like Ashley pointed out, tech staff to support it, and, Dropbox Pro and, Google Drive. I think this cost just like starts adding up. So,
Yeah, sure.
you have to sort of scale that back because it's almost coming up to as much as rent at this point. So it's either one or the other. So,
I feel like there's so many ways, so many directions you can go with the comments you made, and the thought of just what it means for a company creatively. Ashley, you and I were talking about just the face-to-face part of working and what that really meant. The tyranny of the schedule, where every conversation right now has to fit within 30-minute markers, and this stupid Zoom thing that is part of all of our lives continually. But Matt, I'm almost curious of like, when you want to argue against that article, these are some of the arguments that you want to make, right? You're like, hey, what about the responsibility we have though to the other employees who maybe don't have the same working conditions, and it's better if they're at office. And then how do we balance that with what I'm afraid of is like a false anxiety that we're putting into the universe, and everyone has to say I'm afraid in order to get away with what they really mean is my kids. I don't know what to do with my kids because the infrastructure for my children's daycare isn't in place. So I'm going to act like I'm afraid or say I'm afraid. And so there's a false anxiety, and we're playing those angles.
I think it's like a marriage. Like just communicate, just say what's happening. Like, yeah, if your kid's infrastructure thing is all screwed up, then fine, we'll deal with that. But it's a case by case thing. But don't expect that, oh yeah, we're just going to automatically be 2 days at home and 3 days in the office, or whatever it is that you think is allowed. But like, it's interesting because outside of things like the example of the kids in the schools and whatnot, we have created this excuse of like, oh well, magically in 400 days, I am now, I now can't leave my house, or my working conditions have changed. Well, no, they haven't. Like you're scared, you're a bubble boy, whatever it is. And I'm not diminishing anybody who really does feel like that, because it's true. But come on, guys, like, let's all be realistic. Let's take a step back and let's try to understand, like, it's a great point. I can't turn my chair and answer a question that would take that long. Like, everything takes so much longer to do. And if you doubt that, only you got to look at the networks. Like, we were so busy last year because networks had to be remote, but they still had to do all of the same kind of work. So they called places like us, but then places like us were remote and everything. So like the trickle down of them taking it forever because they're not producing at the same speed, but then they want us to produce at the same speed to fill that backlog. And then like, so really it just comes down to like, hey, look, let's just look at what's going on. Let's take a step back. I love the idea of separating the two. It makes a ton of sense. I think what also it allows is, and I think that we've actually gotten a little worse people-wise, and I think we've become more fractured. Like working from home has allowed us to silo ourselves with only the people we want to silo ourselves with, which happens to be the people we agree with most with. So what we're doing is like, you miss the opportunity to work with people who you may not agree with politically, personally, whatever, but you still have to come together to accomplish a goal. Like that has gone away completely. And just look at the media, like it's all over the place.
Yeah.
So it has made us, I think, worse people because of it. And we're not flexible anymore. We don't want to talk about other stuff. We're not interested in like other people's lives. We just care about the people that matter to us. And that's just not okay.
Go ahead, Ashley. I know you want to, diversity's been really, go ahead.
What I was going to say, Tim and I talked earlier about what I think is a great opportunity for us now as leaders is to focus and help our staff and peers focus on the sort of positive instead of the negative here, which is hard to do. But I think it's easy to sort of focus on the bad parts of coming back and the commute, and the fears and all those things. But I think especially for junior staff, it's really hard because we had 14, I was telling Tim earlier, which is hard to believe. We had 14 people during the last 440 days that started their job with us and ended their job with us and never set foot in the studio and never met any of us in person, which is hard for me to believe, especially as an owner, that I never met these people. They started their job with me and ended their job with me, and I never met them. Of course, we had these Zoom meetings and whatever and back and forth, but especially as a junior staff member, if we help them understand how much of your growth as a junior employee, or even as any employee, happens in the margin, during the day, like you're saying, Matt, these side conversations and these open collaborations, if you're not on a scheduled Zoom, that all has gone away. And these kinds of interactions, it's not, networking and that kind of stuff. It's just working together. Those kinds of collaborations are the things that help you grow in your career, learn from leaders that are more experienced than you. And if you're not around it in person, you don't pick up on that stuff. You don't learn from a creative director. You don't learn from leaders. You just don't have the opportunity. If you're sitting alone in your office, you're getting your work done, but are you growing at all in your career? You could sit and do that for years and never advance, never learn, never grow. So if we help our employees and staff think about, yes, it's a trade-off for sure. You're driving into work. You may have to smell someone's lunch in the microwave, all those things that go along with working in an office, but there's a lot of positive that goes with it. Going out on Friday to Taco Friday, I was talking about with Tim, those kinds of things that you can't, they're invaluable. They're invaluable.
The story of Spielberg when he was a young man and he wanted to get into show business. So this is obviously years ago, but he snuck onto the Universal Studios lot, found an empty office and pretended it was his office. And he started taking meetings in that office. But what Spielberg knew is if he could just be in that place, he could advance his career. Just get me in that place, right? That's how he did it. So this thought that like, how would somebody break in with that kind of, opportunity to be face to face, meet people, know that you can share those stories with them. It just doesn't happen. And we almost as leadership have that responsibility. I think, Vikkal, that's what you're saying too, is like, you're recognizing people come from different backgrounds, but they all need a chance to interact and say something to each other so we can have relationships beyond just moving pixels.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so that's totally it. I think just feeding off of each other and getting, the good vibes or the, taking the bad vibes, I think, definitely helps. Like I've seen like we've had like immense sort of, I guess, dearth of talent especially in New York City, where you have, it's very hard to find freelancers these days. And it's not really cyclical. I think it's just because people have moved out of the city. A lot of them have moved out of the city. And so if we were to like go back full time to studio, it's going to be impossible to find a freelancer on a consistent basis that, will hit the mark and will be in sort of geographical, proximity to come in every day. And you definitely need your core staff to be there, to support that sort of level of remote work. And I think a freelancer being remote is completely acceptable. But the core member of the team, like the creative directors, the technical directors, the staff animators, who we have sort of developed a shorthand with over the years. I mean, just working remotely is not cutting it. And I think this is a good time to sort of weed out the people that are really interested in working with the company, and that sort of entrepreneurial spirit that they have to sort of make something out, like build their brand within the company. It's like, to get those people will understand the pain points and will sort of work with you to make it happen, while the others will sort of hide behind the guise of fear, or just the pandemic in general, and keep working.
So let me ask you guys this question and kind of flip it a little bit. I think that to some degree, there are things that were more productive because we're remote, right? It does seem that there's also opportunity and recognition that in reality, some things maybe worked more smoothly, or we got a more dedicated time, or people recognized their own value proposition, that it's more important to get the job done than put in your 8 hours or something like that. So what do you want to say about, like, is there opportunity for somebody though, and really a improvement in some situations where working remote actually increased productivity or allowed for opportunities to work with somebody you would have never worked with if they had to be in Atlanta or New York City or DC?
Yeah, that's definitely the flip side to it, right? Like, you're working with newer talents, and in the past year, like, we worked with talents overseas more than we have, ever in my 10-year career. And I think that's also because the local work in all markets sort of dwindled. So wherever there was work, artists were reaching out, or we were looking for, artists that were available, working with new talents to create, the right sort of artists to fit into the job. But I do think there's sort of merits of like working with the same person consistently. So there's a shorthand, and
Yeah,
you
I call
find
it
you
knowledge.
find
Yeah,
retain knowledge. Exactly. There's difference between like variety, and then retain knowledge, where it's just easier to get the tasks done.
yeah, sure. How about you, Matt? Do you find that there's a decision to be made or balance to be made of some gain in that remote working?
Sure, I think for me, it'd be a case by case basis. It'd be like, hey, we've got this project, and I know that you're probably going to need a solid 2 days to work on something. So why don't you do this from home? We'll see, results, updates at the end of the day. We can talk about them, but at least then, like, I know that person is got like 8-10 hours of uninterrupted time. That makes sense to me. Not a big deal, right? But I don't want to use that as a crutch. And I think partly too, like, yeah, being able to build it in and make that a benefit, sure, it helps people out a little bit. I'm okay with that too, but let's not abuse it, right? If we can all be in the office, if we can be collaborating together, let's do it. If it's maybe a little bit slow, sure, work from home. I don't have a problem with it. Like, just it's got to be a give take, but you have to be able to. I think as the owner, you have to be able to set that example, and everybody needs to understand, like, guess what? This is a benefit. This is a perk. this is like, let's respect this for what it is and not try to take advantage of it. Because as soon as it is like, it's gone, I'm out, I'm done.
Actually, answer this question, because I know location is really important, because you're kind of a tech driven in your production pipeline, where the attachment of the computers to do the kind of animation you do, the server that they have to be attached to. So workflow wise, it's a major benefit to production to be in the office. But someone's asking, like, what about the habits that have already been formed over the next year?
I saw that question. And so the easiest thing I can say about that, and not to take your question lightly, but at the beginning of COVID, we had 3 days notice and everybody went home, and they had to figure that out. And they didn't have 66 days to figure out how to do that. We had 3 days, and we went home and figured that out. And an even better example is my mom is 77 years old. And when COVID hit, she wanted to get a bike, like a lot of people. And she hadn't ridden a bike in probably 5-10 years, but she got a bike and she started riding her bike. And some habits from when you're a kid, and you don't need to relearn them. And I think we don't need 3 months to relearn how to work from work. We've done that for our whole lives. We don't need to relearn that one. You just get back on the bike and drive to work and start working from work. Not to be, silly about it, but it's true. It's like riding a bike. We're just going to go back to work and start working. I think that in our case, some things that we're thinking about as well are just that, again, looking at it as separate to COVID, which I think we just have to do. There are things about it that I think people should keep in mind. We try really hard to think about all angles of our benefits and the diversity of our studio. It's really important to us. And the thing about and I think a lot of people in our studio situation are the same. Our rigs, the rigs that we work on, include a Cintiq, really powerful computers, and everybody that we hire is not at the same economic or level in their career. So in order for some people to work from home, they have to have the same, these aren't laptops that you can fold up and take home and work. These are expensive machines. Some people have that type of rig at home that they can work on, and then they can have one at work too. It's not like you can work at home 2 days a week and at work 3 days a week, unless you have that structure at your house. There are certain people that have that, and there are certain people that don't. And so that will very quickly separate the haves and the have-nots in our studio, unless we provide 2 rigs, one at home and one at work. When we separated and everybody went home, some people had those machines at their house, and some people had to take equipment home with them, which we provided. So if we provide this benefit, we're going to have to think long and hard about how it's going to be structured and how it's going to work.
So that's available to everyone, right? Because it's almost, some people, you might have the benefit, but some people can't take advantage of it if they don't have the ability, meaning
that's exactly right.
To do it.
We can't say you can work from home unless you are able to provide the appropriate internet access, the appropriate infrastructure and work. The reason that we've had to do it to this point is because we had to do it. But we can't say, sure, you can work from home if you have unless you have your own equipment, unless it's up to, unless it will work for this capability. Yeah. So we don't want to sort of delineate unless we're really thinking about that carefully. Yeah, and I would caution everybody.
To stay fair, it really is such a different challenge to recognize when you're looking at diversity, you're looking at economic diversity also in your workplace, and just say, are we here to give people opportunity, and therefore can they afford these benefits? Well, that's a crazy challenge.
Right.
I almost want to ask one more question, but we're at 2:30 already. We honestly probably just need to keep this going, because I can see the chat happening, and there's a lot of questions here about what a hybrid workspace might look like. And some of my own curiosity is like these lifestyle changes that people have made over the last year. People have moved away from where their office was, have set up base camp some other way. And so there's a sense of like, well, the talent now exists in South Dakota more than it ever was before. How do I still tap into that talent and not make it look like I'm favoring somebody when I'm asking everyone else, if you are within a driving distance to come into my office. I think there's going to be some of these kind of leadership issues that are going to approach us, and we have to figure out how do we navigate that tension in our workplace. Let's do this. Let's put a pin in this, because I know, like, we could do 2 hours. I think maybe what we really need to do is turn this into a few day conversation and roll this thing out. Because actually, you got super practical at the beginning, and I loved just learning that part of like the all team meeting, what you said, how you approached it. That's already helpful, and I feel like that needs to be unpacked more. And then Vikkal and Matt, this stuff that you guys are talking about of like how to make these decisions and how to communicate it to people. We don't want to leave anyone out, but there's also this huge opportunity that we can take advantage of personally and lifestyle wise. So I
do want to say really fast. I know it's super emotional. We do have, even before COVID, we have 5 remote employees that live all over the place, and we do have it. It's not something that we're not thinking about in our future. We're just trying to keep it separate from this issue.
I think that's the greatest takeaway, is just that thought of like how to separate the pandemic from the work remote discussion and understand what the benefits are, opportunities are. But I would want to say to everyone, let's keep the fear out of it, or having to need that excuse in order to bring it in, because this unneeded anxiety, which is really what we want to cure ourselves from, is this unneeded anxiety that we have to be afraid of something that truly seems to be mostly cured in our culture. Like, we could live a more free life. Let's have the freedom of life, as well as take advantage of some of the new benefits. That would be great.
Sure. And I just put those 2 links in there to those articles I mentioned at the top.
Cool. So, if anyone's watching this just off of the recording, we'll copy those also into RevCommunity so people can see that as well. Matt, thanks for sharing. I appreciate you bringing up this topic to Joel. Ashley, your insights are wonderful. Vikkal, thanks for bringing up the opportunities and talk about what your communities do. And if you are interested in knowing more, hearing more, let's just push this off to RevCommunity. We'll start a general discussion there. We can kind of share things in text. And if we want to continue this conversation the next couple of weeks, we'll bring it back up. But thank you all very much for being part of the conversation today. It was great.
Sure, thanks, Tim. Good to see everybody.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.